In the women's section of Sing Sing's death house, the lady behind the crime story of the decade settles into her final night. Ruth Snyder, 32 years old, tense but controlled. No scenes, no dramatics. Guards say the woman once nicknamed Ruthless Ruth looks nothing like the bold socialite in headlines, only tired, drained, worn thin by the slow crawl toward execution. She tries to sleep but can't, drifts, startles, stares at the ceiling, and every so often she whispers a prayer, the Catholic prayers she learned behind these walls. Dawn inside Sing Sing's death house. Snyder dresses neatly, as if for an ordinary day, and eats her breakfast: cereal, toast, coffee. She offers the matron a bright good morning, a hint of forced cheer sliding through the tension, because she still believes there might be a chance. The courts are done, but the governor hasn't spoken. No one has officially told her today is final, so hope lingers where it shouldn't. A reprieve, a delay, anything. Sing Sing staff begins the quiet rituals of execution day. When the matron tells her, "You'll have to take a hot bath, Ruthie," Snyder's face drops. "Why, Ma?" she whispers, but she already knows. A hot bath, routine before the chair. The water improves conductivity. In the shower, Snyder breaks for the first time. She cries softly, the first crack in her composure all day. Matron Lillian Hickey Ma, as Snyder calls her, stands close, the only comfort she's allowed. Family hour in the death house. Her mother and brother arrive, separated from her by a heavy screen. Seeing her mother behind a barrier, Ruth protests softly. "I don't see why I can't kiss my mother goodbye. There's no harm in that." But prison rules prevail. No physical contact is allowed. The visit is short and painful. They press hands to the opposite sides of the screen. Her mother tries to be brave. Ruth tries to smile. Both fail. After a few final words of love, the guards escort them out. Her daughter, Lorraine, just 9, never comes. Ruth refused to let her. No little girl should see her mother like this. Noon settles over the death house. Ruth Snyder sits with the matrons, drifting in and out of reflection. Months of waiting have carved her into something resigned. "Well, I've got to die sometime. Why shouldn't I die now?" she mutters. Outside, Ossining begins to swell. Reporters crowd sidewalks. Headlines recycle the nickname the tabloids gave her, the Iron Widow. And the widow part? That's exactly why she's there. Ruth Brown, born in 1895 as the only child of working-class Scandinavian parents. She married Albert Snyder in 1915. Their daughter, Lorraine, followed 3 years later, but the marriage soured. Feeling trapped, Ruth began an affair with Henry Judd Gray, a lingerie salesman. What started as an escape turned into a murder plot accelerated by insurance money. Poisoning attempts failed, gas, pills, other schemes, so they chose violence. One night in 1927, they entered Albert's bedroom. A sash weight to the skull, picture wire around the neck, chloroform to mask. They ransacked the house, burned the bloody clothes, tie Ruth just loose enough to wriggle. At dawn, still bound, Ruth woke her daughter Lorraine and told her intruders had broken in. Investigators didn't buy a word of it. The stolen jewelry was under Ruth's mattress. The sash weight was found in the basement, and Ruth had no injuries consistent with her story. She confessed and named Gray. His alibi crumbled just as fast. Their trial, the Sashweight murder, became a national circus. Blaming each other at every turn didn't save them. Both were sentenced to die. Senior matron Ma ends her shift and steps out of the prison gates, on call but gone. Inside, the hours tighten. Still no word from Albany, no telegram, no reprieve. Governor Smith remains silent, and whatever hope lingered is evaporating fast. Staff understand the reality. If clemency doesn't arrive by early evening, the executions proceed. But Ruth doesn't know that yet. The warden keeps her suspended in uncertainty, a deliberate choice to avoid last-minute hysteria. To the outside eye, Sing Sing looks calm, but behind the locked doors, preparations tighten for what's coming. A double execution. Ruth Snyder and the man she once loved, Henry Judd Gray, both scheduled for the same night. The clemency deadline hits. No reprieve. The governor stays silent. Both Snyder and Gray are officially declared sane and fit for execution. Warden Laws makes the call to the death house. Proceed. The off-duty matron, Ma, is summoned back. When she steps into Ruth Snyder's cell, the reaction is immediate. Ruth had been told earlier if there was no execution, she wouldn't see Ma again tonight. Now she does. When Ruth saw me, she knew, the matron later said. And yet, Ruth doesn't break. No sobbing, no hysteria. Those tears were spent hours ago. She greets the matron with a soft, resigned smile, and from that moment on, faces death with a strange, steady composure that astonished everyone who witnessed it. Sing Sing doesn't ask Snyder what she wants for a last meal. They worry the question might break her, so they simply bring one. A full chicken dinner, chicken broth, roast chicken with mashed potatoes, celery, stuffed olives, ice cream for dessert. A cup of good coffee, an indulgence added because Gray kept complaining about the prison's usual brew. Ruth eats with real appetite, surprising everyone watching. She finishes most of it. Half joking, she tells matron Ma, "Guess I won't go to the chair hungry." Calm, almost casual. When she's done, she smokes a cigarette in silence, one of the few small freedoms left to her on her final night. To pass the time, Ruth suggests what she always did to calm herself. "I tell you what we'll do, Ma. Let's play cards." They deal a final game. Ruth, ever the sharp player, wins easily. The matrons later admit they could barely focus, their hands trembling, thoughts elsewhere. But Ruth, she seems genuinely absorbed, even laughing softly when she outplays them. Night settles over Sing Sing, but the crowds outside only grow. They've come from far to witness the execution of the year. Men, women, children, flappers in silk scarves. More than 400 people pack the street, all treating the night like a strange, morbid gala. Vendors weave through the masses selling peanuts and hot coffee, turning the night into something between a carnival and a wake. Some shout for justice, some for blood. Most are simply there to watch, pulled in by morbid curiosity and the promise of history. The matrons step into Snyder's cell. "It's time, Ruth," one says softly. She nods. Following Sing Sing tradition, Warden Laws has decided the more fragile of the two condemned goes first. So Ruth is moved. The first of the two, taken to a holding cell just 20 paces from the chair. She walks between the matrons without resistance, almost comforting them, speaking softly to Ma, the matron she trusts most. Execution has broken stronger people, but Ruth seems almost composed. She even jokes faintly, "I always wanted to walk down this hallway in style." Staff would later say Ruth Snyder went to her death with more dignity and composure than the tabloids ever gave her credit for. At 10:45, the door to the last cell clicks shut. Inside waits Father McCaffrey, the Catholic chaplain. He begins the prayers for the dying. Ruth follows, repeating the Latin responses. Her final prayer is striking. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." A plea for mercy for herself and for those about to take her life. The priest ends by giving her absolution. Moments later, the matrons begin the final physical preparations. They straighten her dress, snip a few locks of hair to clear the spot for the head electrode, and roll down her right stocking so the metal plate will make clean contact with the skin. Ruth doesn't flinch, but when she sees Matron Ma trembling, she steps forward and hugs her. "Don't cry, Ma," she murmurs. The matron breaks into tears. Later, she would confess, "I was closer to a breakdown than Ruth was." About 40 people pack into the chamber. Guards, doctors, officials, and nearly 24 reporters. But one of those reporters, there on a secret mission that will later make him famous. More on him at the end. The room turns as Ruth Snyder is brought in. Petite, blonde, drained of color. One journalist writes she looked like a disheveled wreck, whispering prayers under her breath. Another marvels that her step was firm for a woman minutes from death. But that strength evaporates the moment her eyes meet the chair. She screams, tries to pull back. The matrons rush to hold her up as she collapses into sobs. Half carried, she's placed in the chair, her breath sharp and shallow as the leather restraints are pulled tight. Her final words, soft and breaking, just before the mask comes down. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." The same phrase she uttered with the priest moments earlier, now offered for all to hear. Robert G. Elliott, the nation's most seasoned executioner, stands behind a tiny observation window. Tonight, he isn't alone. He's brought his personal doctor. The veteran had admitted he was nervous for this one and wanted medical backup in case he collapsed. Warden Laws gives the signal. The switch is thrown. A 2,000-volt surge slams through Ruth Snyder. Her body stiffens violently, shoulders and legs jerking against the straps. The air fills with a deep electrical hum, a wet, buzzing crackle. Then, silence. A thin coil of smoke lifts from beneath the headpiece, carrying the sharp stench of scorched hair. At 11:07 p.m., Ruth Snyder is pronounced dead. But don't click away. The most shocking part hasn't happened yet. From the witness room, one reporter slips out fast, weaving through the crowd. The reporter I mentioned earlier, Tom Howard, Chicago Tribune photographer, and strapped to his ankle, a tiny hidden camera. And he had just done the impossible. He captured the first photograph ever taken of a New York electrocution. The next morning, the Daily News would plaster it across the front page. Snyder's body frozen in the chair under a single, infamous headline, "Dead." Reaching the end says it all. You'll want what's next. Subscribe now and don't miss the next chapter. Every week, we uncover the stories most people never hear.